Live. I think we are. Always making sure. And should be live now. And looks like we are. Okay. There we go. All right. All right. Good evening, everyone. We're just starting off. We haven't missed anything. We are just getting our coffee together and everything. Hello, everyone in YouTube land, and hello, everyone on the premium chats. I see you guys. See Car, David. Okay, we have a lot to talk about tonight. Obviously, there's been a lot going on in the tropical Atlantic and also tropical Pacific. And okay, yeah, definitely that's a good point. If you're having any issues with the video or anything, definitely check your browser. I learned that last week. Anyway, we have a lot to talk about with the tropics. Now, I've been saying for quite some time, especially premium members know this, that I have been warning that when we start getting major hurricanes lifting up towards the northern Atlantic, that is when we start getting some very interesting enhancement of the 500 millibar pattern. So I want to walk through some of the factors here and kind of give a warning for the potential for a significant rainfall event for next week. I'm not 100% certain, but the blocking parameters are present that we need to be aware of it, okay? So I want to break down and explain to you what I'm seeing evolving, and then I'll take your questions and go over everything. So let's pull in some of this data as we get the coffee. What do we got, hon? French vanilla?
Yeah, French vanilla and your Batman mug.
French vanilla and the Batman mug. By the way, I don't know if everyone saw, but my wife, she changed her hair to red. She looks absolutely amazing, as always, but even more so now, especially since I could see her hair color, which is awesome. But that's the big news. So I'm happy about it. So there we go. All right. So first of all, let's take a look at, here we are. Okay. So here we have Victor, which is going to be lifting up towards the northeastern Atlantic. Won't have too much of an impact on us, but a very vigorous little tropical storm. This right here, of course, is Sam. Now, Sam is a major hurricane. Has winds of, let's see here. Last I checked, 100 and... where are the winds here? Moving to the west-northwest. I think it's more than 40. Actually, that's Victor. Sorry about that. There it is. There's Sam. 130 mile per hour winds. We're doing good tonight. 130 mile per hour winds is finally moving to the northwest. It is a major hurricane. Right now, pretty impressive. Pretty good eye wall. Nice little wide eye. It's been fluctuating in strength because it's been going through multiple eye wall replacements, a theme that we've been seeing a lot this tropical season. So it's a very vigorous, powerful storm, okay? And typically, when we want to look for influences in changing the 500 millibar pattern or enhancing high latitude blocking, you want to take a look at the strength of the storm. And typically, when you get above category 3, that's when it produces enough latent heat energy to start to change the 500 millibar pattern and influence ridge and troughs around it, around the storm. So right here we have our outflow here. Very impressive. So you can see you have a very strong anticyclonic circulation aloft. You have a strong warm core, low pressure system. Whole structure is very well established. Beautiful storm, my favorite type of storm, which is basically not going to bother anybody. That's my favorite type of storm. Beautiful, powerful, but doesn't impact land. That is always very preferable for meteorologists. So this is certainly some good news that's not going to impact us. And so there's the forecast over the next 5 days, lifting up towards the northern Atlantic by Monday, right? Keep that in the back of your mind, okay? Now, let's talk about the Pacific real fast. This is Typhoon Mindul. I'm probably pronouncing that horribly wrong. But it's another vigorous, powerful hurricane, or in this case, in the Pacific, typhoon. And look where it's lifting up towards, the Aleutian Islands. What is that doing? Well, it's creating all sorts of havoc here with sending storm after storm. We've been seeing a lot of typhoons heading up into this area of the world right around the Aleutian Islands where you're getting all these storms. And that's creating an environment where the EPO, that's the Eastern Pacific Oscillation, has been going positive and negative, right? Now, what the EPO is basically a measurement of is the orientation of troughs and ridges. When we have a negative EPO, we typically have a cool weather pattern or cold weather pattern in the eastern United States because it translates to a trough in the eastern United States. When we have a positive phase, it usually translates to a warmer phase. Not always, but normally. Now, this is never a one-to-one ratio. You have to take into account of lag time of the trough axis moving through the nation and the evolution of the pattern overall, right? So it's never a one-to-one phase, but you kind of get the idea of where the pattern is going. All of these features lead to what we call high latitude blocking. And so you start to keep an eye on the North Atlantic Oscillation, which has been predominantly negative and looks like it's going to get a nice little kickstart to remain negative as we go through much of the middle of October. So what does this all translate to? Well, when we take a look at the water vapor satellite picture, pull it up here, of the globe, okay, this kind of plays out the whole scenario here. Sam is going to get drawn up into this trough. As it's doing so, all of this moisture and heat helps to build up the ridge, which is starting to grow right here. This ridge, which we can start to see an extent of here and here, starts to block this upper level low up. So think of this like the traffic jam getting ready to set up on the LIE. So this blocks up. This allows this ridge to build while this trough out here gets cut off. And you end up with another upper level low that starts to spin across the southern plains. So what you end up with is basically a 3 jet stream couplet where you have an upper level low that gets blocked under this ridge. This ridge is blocked up because of this upper level low, and this upper level low is blocked up because Sam is getting drawn up here, enhances the upper level low, enhances the ridge, blocks everything up in the Atlantic. So because Sam is able to introduce so much latent heat energy, which acts like a pump for the ridge, it leads to everything getting blocked up. And when you get all this blocking, you start to end up with a scenario where you get stationary fronts, moisture transport off the Atlantic, and the potential for waves of low pressure producing quite a bit of rainfall. So how are the models handling this? Because models, they have a hard time handling what's happening right in front of us. This is a very convoluted and very complicated pattern. Good coffee. Oh yeah, it's National Coffee Day too, so there you go. That works out nice. So when we take a look at this whole scenario here, understand the amount of energy and moisture that's going on in this whole scenario here leads to a lot of chaos. And that chaos leads to a lot of volatility in the model guidance. So we start off first with the Gfs Ensemble Guidance. And this is the block I was talking about. Now you see this ridge? This ridge is enhanced by the typhoon. That ridge enhances this trough. This trough enhances this ridge, which can't go anywhere because of this trough, which is enhanced by Sam. That whole process blocks this upper level low from moving anywhere, And so what you get is a moisture transport and possibly a strong mid-level jet streak coming right in from the Atlantic Ocean right into the mid-Atlantic and the southeast. So imagine, let's say, a stationary front right around here, moisture transport, and somewhere between Connecticut to North Carolina, you just get waves of rainfall and these waves of low pressure, which, considering the water table, well, it could lead to some flash flooding. This is a perfect example how you don't need a hurricane to directly impact the weather pattern to create a lot of havoc. And so I'm seeing this whole signature here showing up. And it makes me concerned that next week we might be dealing with a significant rainfall event. We're seeing the same thing here showing up on the Gfs guidance. Same setup. Same setup on the European Ensemble Guidance. Very, very similar. Same setup. Not perfectly identical, but close enough. And then the same thing here on the European operational. So it makes me concerned because I'm starting to see this signal more and more for next week. You see this right here? This right here, and I'll zoom in. Here's your high pressure system transporting a maritime air mass into the mid-Atlantic coast. Here is your pressure gradient producing a strong fetch at the surface, but also at the mid-levels. And then you have all this moisture. And guess what? It's going to be lifting up against the Appalachian Mountains and along a stationary front. So you have frontogenesis, you have orographic lifting, you have a persistent moisture transport, and you have a clash between a maritime air mass and your tropical air mass over the southeast and Gulf Coast. And typically when you have this signature showing up, models do not handle this very well until you get closer. Now, in this scenario, very easily you could have most of the focus from the Delmarva Peninsula down to the North Carolina coast. Or it could set up from Connecticut down to Virginia. Don't know yet. A lot of that is dependent on exactly where this high pressure system sets up. But this is a very, very strong high pressure system showing up on every model guidance that we have for this time of year. It is, hazard to say, unusually strong. Okay? So you have all the hallmarks there. And normally I wouldn't make too much of a big deal about this. But considering that, I don't know, some locations are like 8 inches above normal for rainfall for this month, it leads to a concern here where flooding is very easy. And we have a lot of people who have homes, basements, that are not prepared for this type of rainfall. And this could easily produce a 1 to 3, 2 to 4 inch type rainfall event. It's just a question of where does the best frontogenesis set up? And so this translates to the next question is, what does this all mean for the rest of October? I think the first half of October is obviously going to trend near to below normal in temperatures, relatively dry initially for the first couple of days, but then right around the middle of the month, right when this sets up, I expect our rainfall to go above normal. The second half of October, I think it's going to be driven more and more by the influence of La Nina, which this is the SOI. This is the best way to measure an impact from La Nina or El Nino, by the way, because this is the pressure, okay? This is what drives all your jet stream configurations, okay? So when I look at the SOI and I look at these values here, what this tells me, especially the monthly and the seasonal values, is that we have influences of a weak La Nina already in place. And so the question is, how fast does that overwhelm the MJO, which is another tropical forcing feature? I think it's already starting to. Okay, we can see that based on the way that we have a lack of shear in the tropical Atlantic and the way that the subtropical jet stream is a little bit weaker and the polar jet stream is far more enhanced already. So I think the second half of October, based on this, is going to feature more of a southeast ridge, and we should have a mild second half of October. I'm not saying hot, I'm saying mild. The one caveat, the one uncertainty I have is our North Atlantic Oscillation. If it stays neutral, don't be surprised if we see a lot of backdoor cold fronts for the second half of October. And let's say the New York City metro stays near normal and kind of unsettled, and Philadelphia is on the warm side of that with more above normal temperatures. That's something I'm going to have to watch out for and work out as we get closer to the second half of October. But I think it's going to be a month of a lot of volatility and extremes. So that's kind of what I'm seeing right now. I mean, obviously it's quiet right now. It's beautiful out there, but I don't think that's going to last very long. And I think that starting Sunday night, I would not be surprised if we see quite a bit of rainfall potential out of this scenario. Let's see what the GFS is doing with this. Might as well pull that up. And let's see here. See if the GFS is seeing the same type of scenario. We'll use 12Z because I don't trust the 18Z guidance. Just something that I never really trust because it doesn't have full data ingested in it, unlike the European guidance. Yeah, it's showing the same scenario. In fact, the GFS goes even further in producing a wave of low pressure, an enhanced one. So it's showing the same type of environment. Unsettled conditions, waves of low pressure, just a mess. So the potential is there. So now, let's see here. Let's see if there's anything. Let's see. No questions yet on YouTube, but we got plenty. Let me dive into some of your questions here in the premium chat. Okay. So, of course, Card, how you doing? How you doing, Dave? How you doing, James? All right. Let's see here. Just tried Black Rifle Coffee. Real good stuff. Nice. All these storms right during king crab season, reason why fishing the Bering Sea is so dangerous. Oh, absolutely. And don't expect that to get any better, by the way. I think that we're going to see a predominant negative EPO pattern going all the way on through this winter. I am very concerned about the high latitude blocking this year. And I think that the stormier it gets around the Aleutian Islands, the stormier we will get. And much like last year, I think we're going to be on our toes. I really do. Hearing some talk about subtropical, tropical potential in the Western Caribbeans to U.S. next week. Okay. Climatologically speaking, we typically see a lot more activity towards the Caribbean as we head into October. That's usually where we like to see that focus. You can see a lot of storms developing right around Jamaica, cut up through Cuba, and head right up the coast. You can see some of them developing around Jamaica and head towards the Gulf of Mexico. But that's typically where we like to see it. The MJO phase, which is losing some of its influence, but still important, would be in a favorable position to enhance tropical development in the Caribbean and the Gulf of Mexico for the middle and latter part of October. So I like that idea. I really, really do, where we see that increasing potential. The thing is that with models and predicting tropical development, there are some warm core lows are very, very fickle beasts. Okay, so you can get a little bit of dry air. It completely disrupts the entire development of the circulation, and you don't get that development. So I never trust any model guidance that would suggest, hey, look, there's a major storm heading your way for the Gulf Coast or whatnot. What I would do when I see that type of signal is say, okay, the environment will be favorable, but I don't know. No one knows exactly what will develop because you need the actual warm core low to develop to actually get the full structure. Is it slanted a little bit? Is there dry air? Is there any vertical wind shear that we don't know about? All these factors we don't know. But I will say that the pattern itself is going to be more favorable. Let's see. Card says, looking at Earth New School, the 250 millibar level is really amplified and really strong. Yeah, that is usually a hallmark of La Nina patterns. In La Nina, your polar jet stream is stronger. Now, this, by the way, is why you have a very interesting characteristic in the winter with strong La Ninas and strong El Ninos. You see, when you have a strong La Nina, it creates a very strong polar jet stream, which overrides everything and destroys your high latitude blocking. When you have strong El Nino, you have a very strong subtropical jet stream, which does the same thing. It overrides your blocking, completely disrupts the interaction with the polar jet stream, and prevents you from getting major storms. This is why I always say if you're looking for significant snowfall, you want to look for weak La Ninas and weak El Ninos to have the potential for that best interaction in the characteristics of those patterns for all you snow lovers out there. Yes, Susan? Ah, sweet. Let's see here. Okay. All right. So there's questions about volcanic eruptions and the weather pattern. Okay. I'm just going to be generic here, but we're probably focusing on the factor here with around Africa. I'll put it this way. Right now, it is not strong enough of an eruption, in my opinion, to have a significant impact on the 500 millibar pattern. Now, locally, absolutely. Like the African coast, absolutely. For as far as impacting the pattern as a whole, what I typically want to see is, first of all, an eruption in the tropics. Why the tropics? Because that allows a volcano, especially a powerful one, to have a greater influence on the entire stratospheric environment from the tropics to the poles. Because what happens is that it interacts with what we call the QBO, which is basically your transport of warm air from the tropics to the polar region. So you add in the sulfur dioxide in that transport, that impacts the entire stratospheric and tropospheric environment. In this case, this is a little bit too far north. So I'm very, very careful when it comes to volcanic influence on the weather pattern. What I typically want to see is an extremely powerful volcano. Well, I don't want to see it, but that's what I would look for a significant impact. This is not it, at least not yet. If we get a more impressive eruption, maybe it could have some influence, but I don't think it's a predominant influence. I think it's more of a localized effect. James asks, will we have to deal with more homegrown tropical systems at all going forward? As far as systems developing along like stationary fronts, yeah, we'll have to be aware of that potential at least through, I'd say, about November 15th, where we have cold fronts diving in, stalling out. Okay, so definitely we're going to have to be aware of that. And be aware of subtropical low pressure systems, which will be named given the change in the characteristics. Rob asks a long question, so let's read this out. So let's talk about the real fun stuff. Everything's fun, but okay. Your long-range write-ups have given a ton of hints towards the winter. Dare say, a good portion of the winter forecast. Well, for the most part. For premium members, what I do is that the winter forecast is a long process. It takes several months to develop, and I never issue it in September and October. And I don't issue maps that only have splotches all over the place, like one provider issued today, which really doesn't tell you anything. But what I do, for those of you who are watching on YouTube, is that I lay out my argument. It's not just a forecast. It's kind of like being a lawyer, where I'm laying out each argument each day, much like I would if I was in a trial, right? So I've been laying out a lot of the information. So the first question is the winter forecast going to be released somewhat earlier than previous years due to the data being observed? I'm shooting for somewhere like an October 20th type ballpark here. Uh, Considering I'm doing the live chats, what I'm thinking of doing is trying to issue it for October 20th, that Wednesday, and follow that up with a live chat that evening to take questions. So that's kind of the plan. I don't want to issue it early because the reason why I do it in October is because I'm looking for specific things that can fundamentally change the forecast. The state of the QBO, for one, the evolution of the snow growth, the evolution of the polar vortex in the middle of October. How is that changing and how is that developing? The evolution of La Nina. Right now, I'm thinking weak La Nina, but let's say I'm wrong. Well, I'll find out pretty quickly in the middle of October because we're going to be heading towards that peak, which is usually towards the end of November. So during that mid-October period, right around October 15th or so, you start to get a pretty good idea of where we're going with the strength and whether or not we're going to see that spike based on what we're seeing with the subsurface temperatures. So I don't want to issue it early because then if it ends up where La Nina ends up being strong or moderately strong, well, that fundamentally changes the forecast. So what? I issued a forecast and I have to go back and change it? So I'd rather wait until I get that data and get a better idea on it. Same thing with the stratospheric environment. Okay. And two, are you willing to go so far to give a year that the winter could remind you of? I never like to do a year that could remind me of. Oh, man. And I did it last year, too, and I kicked myself for it because everyone kept on trying to compare a storm of that year to whatever storm we had. What I would say is that I would look for comparative years of La Ninas, weak La Ninas with a lot of high latitude blocking. Those are the type of years I would try to compare to. But don't try to go with the worst case scenario. Because remember, the worst case scenario, or best case scenario, depending if you like snow, remember, those years, everything fell into place perfectly. And basically it repeated itself constantly. So those type of years are really, really, really hard to get. All right. That's like basically hitting a hole in one. All right. So I wouldn't go that extreme, but yeah, that's kind of like the ballpark I would be heading towards. Let's see here. Cardax, I recall Mount St. Helens did impact things a bit weather-wise, but that also was a strong eruption. Yeah, well, Mount St. Helens would be the type of eruption that I'd be looking for. Okay, that or stronger, which don't get me wrong, the volcanic eruption we're seeing now is strong, but it's not of that level. The reason why I really focus on the tropics more than anything else is because of the wider range of influence it could have. You know, because you're injecting all that material into the atmosphere right where you're getting your best mixing and transport in the atmosphere. Okay? So when you have that environment in place and you have that injection in place, it creates a more wider influence, and that's how you cool your global temperatures by 0.5 degree because it has a wider influence. Historic note, the year without a summer. Yeah, I remember that. That occurred towards the end of the Little Ice Age. Yes, it did. It was directly tied to Mount Tabora. Yes, that's a perfect example. And where that happened in the tropics. Okay, so that kind of gives you an idea of the type of power a volcano can have, especially when you start getting into like the 7s and 8s in terms of eruption. That can fundamentally cool your entire climate in a very, very fast period of time. Very fast. But those are obviously extremely rare. Let's see. Now, I want to pull up I guess we should take a look at the 18Z. I don't like using it, but you know what? Let's take a look at it while I'm waiting for more questions. And let's see what the 18Z is doing. Yeah, it's basically showing the same type of scenario. I don't know whether or not this low pressure system that's showing up on the GFS is reasonable. I'd say that the strength that it has, I like the strength on it on this one. I think this is overdone. This is probably convective feedback here. This would be a strong fetch, and this would just lead to waves of rainfall. And then the further north you get away from this, it's more likely to just drizzle around Connecticut, Long Island in this scenario. But you could see with this type of moisture transport, if this lines up around the Poconos and around northwestern New Jersey, that just produces waves of moderate to heavy rainfall. Yes, it was, yes, that was larger than Krakatoa, and Krakatoa also had major impacts on our climate temporarily. Usually these impacts from volcanoes, when they get into those levels, last about 1 to 3 years, okay, not decades. So it's kind of like a short burst, and then it warms right back up. It doesn't last very long because it is interacting with the QBO and transports and basically works its way out of the atmosphere. By the way, sports update: Mets are actually winning. Of course, now they're winning. It makes sense now. And for all you Yankee fans out there, let's see here. Well, they're losing to the Blue Jays right now, but the Blue Jays have been kicking themselves lately, so we'll see. Maybe they can pull it out. And the Braves are beating the Phillies, so the Braves might just be taking the NL East now. So great. Let's see. I was just going to say that the kind of fetch of this pattern is perpetual drizzle if you're not in the strong part of the rainfall. Yes, this is a type of pattern where I think next week is going to feature a lot of raw, wet conditions. Temperatures stuck in the 60s, cloudy skies, areas of drizzle followed by heavy downpours at times. All right, and the NFL just remind me with the question about the Chargers, which the Chargers are not real. They just got lucky. Looking at the weather pattern for Sunday, for those of you who are interested in football, I'd keep an eye on the Bills game. I think could have some impact with some heavier rainfall for that game. And I think also Cincinnati. I'm not sure. Does Cincinnati play in the Dome? I forgot. But definitely the Buffalo Bills game, that is definitely going to be impacted by rainfall and some heavier rainfall at that. I do expect them to win, though. But I do not agree that the Chargers are for real. Let's see what we got with anything on YouTube. Very good, very interesting. Lot to learn. Oh, well, thank you, Melvin. I appreciate it. Mets suck. They do this year, that's for sure. Holy Christ! Look, I'm a diehard. All of you know I am a diehard Mets fan, and I don't know. Look, whoever has a voodoo doll, please, I give, please, okay. I can't take this anymore. They're in first place, the longest team ever, and it's a record that they fell, not only fallen out of first place, they've fallen below 500. That's never happened before. Ever. In all the history of baseball. Only my team. I love it. There should be like a psychiatrist that's just sitting there, just taking in Met fans and talking through this season. And probably make a boatload of money too. So I want to walk through this water vapor satellite picture and explain to you why this is really, really cool for me to look. Now, the reason why you want to use a water vapor satellite picture is that it kind of gives you a better idea of what's going on in the upper levels and where the air is rising and sinking. So you see this area right here. This is sinking dry air. All right, so it's sinking like this. Okay, it's never like this. It's usually like this. Okay, then over here, all where you have this white and green, this is where you have moisture being lifted. So of course you have very intense moisture being lifted here, and you have some moisture being lifted here. And what this allows you to do is get a better idea in the atmosphere of where the troughs and ridges are and how they interact. So when you start to see this in live, okay, in live motion, it kind of gives you a better idea of what the models are looking at and how they're handling it. We'll get to the NFL picks in a moment. I should have brought them up. Oh, okay. I'll check that out in a second. Okay, I know that I promised to share my NFL picks, so let me pull that up. Now, I have been god awful this year, so if you're using me for picks, I would advise you not, because the past 2 weeks, last week was pretty good. Last week I got 9 out of 7, 9. I was 9-7, but the week before that, holy God, I was horrid. This is the worst I've ever been, 5-11. So, yeah, take my picks with a grain of salt here. But as you can see, I like Cincinnati beating Jacksonville, Washington beating Atlanta, Buffalo taking out Houston, Chicago beating Detroit. I got Carolina. I really like Carolina. I like their offensive line a lot. And they got QB. I don't know where he came from, but he seems to be pretty good. I think he'll beat Dallas. Indianapolis, I'm going over Miami. I think Indianapolis is due. And I'm not that impressed with Miami. Cleveland will beat Minnesota. I think Cleveland's going to be a tough team to beat when they get to the playoffs. Got New Orleans beating the Giants. I don't know when the Giants are going to win a game this year, to be honest with you. Tennessee beating the Jets. I'm going with Kansas City beating Philadelphia because I'm a Chiefs fan. I'm sorry. I'm going to go with them. Rams taking out Arizona. San Francisco will beat Seattle. Baltimore will beat Denver because I don't like Denver, so they can go to hell. Pittsburgh will defeat Green Bay. Tampa Bay will trounce and destroy New England. And quite frankly, I'm going to be kind of giddy watching that game, or keeping an eye on it at least. And then the Chargers will beat the Raiders. So those are my picks. I've been horrible this year, so use that with a grain of salt. And there you go. Let's see here. I got some. Let's see here. I'm with you. What do you think? New York? Huh? What do you think New York City sees first? Frost. I got a couple of good questions on here. I'll take the best one. Okay, just to reiterate, winter forecast likely going to be issued around October 20th. First frost, I'd probably look for. I would not be surprised. Let's see here. For New York City itself, late November. For the suburbs, probably early November, like let's say November 5th or 6th. The higher elevations, more towards Thanksgiving for New York City itself. Or just pick the opposite of Steve's picks. Card, that's not a bad idea, especially the first 2 weeks. That would not be a bad idea at all. But I do like my NFL picks because I like that fun. How about the date first football game in snow is played? Wow. If you add in Denver, I would not be surprised by the middle of October. Definitely would be a threat. Outside of Denver, probably, let's see, you have your dome team, so does it really count? But I would say that right around Thanksgiving, I would not be surprised if locations like Kansas City and whatnot, like those areas, have that potential threat for snowfall. Panthers defense is going to get scorched. I don't know, man. I don't know. We'll see. Let's see here. I think this year, I think the playoffs this year are going to have some significant weather impacts. I think there's going to be a lot of teams that have the potential, considering this La Nina, considering it's a weak La Nina. Usually the second weak La Nina that you have is a very stormy one. So I would not be surprised if we see a lot more winter impacted games for December and for the playoffs in January. And let me see. Let's pull up the 18Z GFS Ensembles and see if it's trying to pull up the same idea. What you want to see with these ensembles is not exactly a match of an exact match, but what you want to see is the overall theme. A lot of times, and this is a good thing to remember in the winter. In the winter, what a lot of people do with winter storms is that they try to find the exact match, and then they find the little differences between the 12Z and 18Z. Oh, it shifted west, it shifted east, it's heavier, it's lighter. You don't want to do that, especially not with ensemble model guidance. What you want to do is look at the overall theme, okay? Synoptic models are not meant to really pin down the little tiny details, like where your mesoscale banding is going to be, where the heaviest snow is going to be. What they're supposed to do is give you the overall view, especially when you're talking about 3-4 days out, okay? So you want to take a look and seeing how does a 500 millibar low form? What factors either speed it up or slow it down? Do we have an enhancement of a jet streak? Okay. Broad questions. What is the overall theme? What is the high latitude blocking like? Is there a strong negative NAO pattern or is it a weak one? Does it allow a storm to cut up towards the Ohio River Valley and redevelop, or does it just continue to head up towards the Great Lakes? Those themes is what you want to look for. So when I look at the ensemble guidance, what I want to look for is the same theme, which is essentially what I'm seeing here. You got your ridge, you got your trough down here, you have your trough in the west, you have your same nice little omega block in the Pacific, omega block over North America, impressive trough over the northern Atlantic, and your upper level low / trough cut off here. This is an interesting theme here, this high pressure system, further enhancing this trough environment. And then you have your setup here for your stationary front. So it's the same theme. So I kind of want, the reason why I'm kind of bringing this up is I'm trying to train you guys so that when we get to the winter, we know what to look for, okay, as a group. When you're looking at the models yourself or you see someone posting all these models like they normally do, you already will know what to look for, okay, and what to throw out. So when you're looking at a winter storm pattern, what you want to look for is specific clues. So for example, if we were in the dead of winter and someone said, oh, there's a major winter storm, you can throw that out. Why? Because a major winter storm needs a ridge axis right here instead of a trough axis. Okay. So those little clues I'm going to be training you up on. So that way you understand and you don't fall for nonsense that gets floated around on social media, which drives me nuts and every other meteorologist nuts. So we'll be working on that. By the way, when a lot of people look at this pattern, they might say, oh, it's going to be well above normal. It's going to be very warm. But when you have a ridge like this and this type of signature showing up, and this compaction of height lines here, this supports sinking air. And so this typically supports a high pressure system that's here, okay, right around Maine. Why is that important? Because that high pressure system transports an air mass from northeastern Canada right into our neck of the woods, which typically means that we end up cool while the Great Lakes ends up very warm. So some of those little details here. I got more questions here. Is that high pressure by the Bahamas about what you would expect with an east-based La Nina? Yes. You would mean this right here. Yes. You see, what I would look for in east-based La Nina is for your ridge to be right around here. With a west-based La Nina, what I look for is the ridge to be right around here. West-based La Ninas basically has a storm track cut up towards Ohio, and because of the jet stream configuration, your negative NAO pattern is displaced, or you just end up with a positive North Atlantic oscillation, and your storms just cut up into the St. Lawrence River Valley. With an east-based La Nina, you allow your storm track to basically cut in towards the Gulf of Mexico and able to cut up towards the Delmarva Peninsula, and your ridge axis allows for your negative NAO pattern to remain in place. So it's a matter of those slight changes in orientation, which makes all the difference in terms of whether or not you're dealing with a very warm winter or a very stormy one. And by the way, La Nina winters typically do not support sustained cold weather for the mid-Atlantic, but very transient weather patterns. So you get a cold shot where you're in your 20s, then you warm back up into the 50s, then you crash back down into the 20s, you get a winter storm, then you warm back up, and then you crash again. You're all over the place. So if you're looking for sustained cold weather, you're going to want to head up towards the northern plains in this type of pattern. Let's see here. Wow, it's already 8:47. Not bad. But yeah, I mean, this right here is a very interesting signal that we're seeing. And even all the way out, let's say out to 384 hours, what can we take from this? Well, it continues to show this evolution of this swinging back and forth of the EPO pattern. We continue to see indications of a polar vortex in the troposphere being focused more towards Canada. We have a split pattern set up here as well. And that leads to competing height fields. And this looks like a very progressive but active weather pattern. And this would lead to slightly above normal temperatures in the east, because you're going to have your trough in the west, so your polar jet stream is going to be elevated, your subtropical jet stream is going to be a little bit more active. Winter 95-96 was like that. Yep. I'm not saying that you should use that year, but yeah, pretty much. I remember that year quite a bit. I think this is another thing that homeowners that you should be aware of in this type of weather pattern, and in the weather pattern I'm envisioning for the winter. Be prepared for significant snow melt. Not just snowfall, but snow melt. What I mean by that is that you can get a snowfall event, and again, remember, your word table is still elevated here. We're not really seeing any type of prolonged break to reduce that impact. So you get like a heavy snowfall event, like let's say 5-6 inches, right? Then you end up with a rainfall event and temperatures spiking up into the 50s. Well, guess what? All that water is seeping into the ground and seeping into your basement. So that is a concern I have going in for the late fall and for the winter. I'm seeing this pattern just compounding itself. I'm not seeing a prolonged break where we can dry everything out, because even in a pattern where we're supposed to be able to dry everything out, we're still remaining relatively active. Now, another question: Do you see ice events being a significant threat this winter? La Ninas typically support more ice events, so yes. I think that one thing that I am very much keeping an eye on is the persistence of ridges or high pressure systems in the St. Lawrence River Valley and Maine. If we continue to see that signal, it produces what's called cold air damming. And when you have cold air damming, it basically lodges cold air in. Now, something that we're going to have to be keeping an eye on in the early winter and midwinter months is the theme of the type of polar and Arctic air masses that we're going to be dealing with. Okay, the quality of the air mass. Okay, if you're getting Arctic air masses where your dew points are in the single digits and your temperatures are in the 20s, that leads to the potential for some significant delays in precipitation type changeover. A model, especially at the onset of these type of new weather patterns, have a very difficult time handling that evolution. We saw that last year, and I think we'll see it this year. I do not know yet to what degree, because I do not yet know the quality of the polar and Arctic air masses that we're going to be dealing with. That aspect is part of this analysis here, which is snow growth. Now, you might be wondering, why, Stephen, would I care about snow growth in Alaska or in Siberia? Well, aside from the impacts of the polar vortex, which we all know about, thanks to Dr. Cohen, the state of the snowpack over northern Canada is basically your refrigerator slash freezer for your polar and Arctic air masses. The more snowfall I see here in the fall, the stronger the polar air masses will be in the winter. The more insulation I get to where our snowpack is able to extend down towards Canada and then towards the Great Lakes and then eventually towards the Mid-Atlantic, means that polar and Arctic air masses are slower to moderate, which means that they're colder when they get here and drier, which impacts the entire forecast, from everything from precipitation type to low pressure track. So keeping an eye on this is very, very important for understanding the entire winter pattern and the environment that you're forecasting in. And when you have a better understanding of this environment, then you have a better understanding of what the error may be when you're dealing with mesoscale models. Another question, does the process have a tendency to feed back on itself? It can. It can feed back on itself. Here's a cautionary tale. If we get a snow growth that's too fast in Siberia and it disrupts the polar vortex too early, let's say in November, sometimes, like in 2016, you can get a polar vortex that re-strengthens in January and then weakens again in February and March. So that leads to a mild January, and then late February and March you get stormy weather, sometimes some polar air masses enough to create some snowstorms. I don't know whether that's going to happen, but that's a wild card that I'm definitely going to be keeping an eye on and putting in the back of my head to keep that process and watching whether it evolves or not. Checking out YouTube. Let's see here. Oh, well, there we go. I answered Mike's question. I didn't even know it. All right. Let's see here. 8:55 already. Oh boy. Oh, by the way, we're very, very close to getting our new logo that we're going to be issuing. I think you guys are going to really, really like it, but we're still working on some of the details. But I think it's going to be really, really cool when you guys get done seeing it. It's basically, the last time I upgraded the logo was, I think, 2009. So it's been a while. Okay. So it's going to be like a new take, kind of get it prepared more for 4K. because it's kind of pixelated. But it'll come off also with a lot of new shirts and hats and stuff like that too. Let's see. I'm going to take one or two more questions, and then we will call it a night. Will there be mugs and T-shirts with it? Yes, there will be. Once we get everything all finalized, and I'll have Susan start working on that, and it'll be good. But yeah, I think it's going to be pretty cool. What we wanted to do, I'm working with the graphic artist, and what we wanted to do is create a logo that's unique. Because like almost every weather company has like a hurricane or a lightning bolt or something like that. So we're kind of going a little bit different. Okay, so I think it's going to be pretty cool, especially with the funnel structures. So I think it's going to be something that's really sweet. What's happening with the merch? We're waiting for the new logo, and then we're going to be evolving the merchandise. It didn't make sense to get merchandise ready and then change it up again with the new logo. So that's all kind of evolving right now. But once we get the new logo, which I'll launch as soon as we finalize everything, then the merch will come. So kind of working on that. So that's going to be pretty cool. I mean, who would have guessed that I'd have merchandise? But there we go. One final look at. Let's refresh Sam here and see how to take a look. Wow, Sam is still really. I thank God this storm is not going to be impacting anybody, any land, because this is one nasty storm. It really, really is. And you can see it's developing. Trying to pull in new data here. I think Goes East has been having some trouble lately, but what are you going to do? But you can just see it's a really impressive storm. So I think that's it for tonight, unless anyone else has any more questions. Let's see here. Some people want to change the name. I tried adding Connecticut, and you know what I found is that when I developed the name not because of anything like, oh, I love this name. I did it because of Google algorithms. And when I added Connecticut, for some reason, it crashed it. It caused me to fall way in the bottom of search. So that's why I didn't include Connecticut. But that's why I have what I have. In the 1800s, would anyone have ever realized Sam existed? People who were in ships would definitely notice that Sam was alive and well, because Sam would be tracking right between where the Europeans would be sending their ships and the Caribbean islands. So yeah, they would probably recognize it. But I get what you're saying. Okay, I understand what you're saying. I know what you're pointing at. But technically, yes, they would. So that's it for tonight. I'm going to shut it down, and I'm going to get some rest, get some sleep. But thank you, as always, for joining. I really, really appreciate it. And if you have a chance, also subscribe to the channel, like it. It actually helps and enhances everything on YouTube. And of course, all you premium members, thank you for being premium members. Really appreciate you guys joining. As we get ready for the winter months, we got a lot on the way. So it's going to be a fun year, I think. Have a wonderful night. And as always, stay safe out there.